Hey y'all. Today we're going to multiply and divide rational expressions. Yesterday we simplified rational expressions, so you factor the top, factor the bottom, and then see what cancels. Today we're going to multiply and divide them. There will come a point where it turns into just like we did yesterday, which is always a great thing that we can just build off of things we already know how to do. So it's still going to be a lot of factoring involved with this. So we're going to do a few multiplying examples and a few dividing examples. So let's start with a number before we get into this one that's right here. So let's start with a number. So I got a number example that's here. That's just a little side note. So when you are multiplying fractions, you do numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. So we do top times top and bottom times bottom. I'm going to do the same thing when I get to my variables and stuff. So 2 times 4 is going to give me 8. And then 3 times 5 gives me 15. If I could simplify this, I would, but I cannot, so we're going to leave it just like this. So we're going to apply this same concept to multiplying and dividing rational expressions. We're going to do top times top and bottom times bottom. So let's get started with the first one. Now, this first one does not have a stated denominator, but we already know that anything that's just there by itself, if we don't see it, the understood denominator is the number 1. So I've gone ahead and drawn that in. Now, I'm going to put the top beside the top and then the bottom besides the bottom. So this is what I mean. So we're going to have 2x squared minus 2 times x squared minus 10x plus 21. And then in my denominator, I'm going to have x squared minus 6x minus 7. So what I did, I took this top and I put it beside this top. I'm not actually going to multiply it out because in a minute I'm going to have to factor it. I literally just recopied it. So all of that is my top. And then I brought this down and multiplying by 1 isn't going to change anything. So I did top times top, bottom times bottom. Again, top times top, bottom times bottom. From here, I'm going to factor as much as I can. So let's start with this factoring. My greatest common factor is the number 2, so I'm going to take that out. Everything else is going to go on the inside. So if I take away the 2 from here, I'm left with x squared minus 1. So that is us doing this first set of parentheses. Now I'm going to factor this part. So that's going to be 2 sets of parentheses. So now I'm factoring this section right here, and that factors into the 2 sets of parentheses. So we'll go ahead and put my x's in. We need 2 numbers that multiply to give me positive 21 and add to give me negative 10. So those numbers are negative 7 and negative 3. So multiplies to give me the last, adds to give me the number in the middle. Now I'm going to factor the denominator. So this is my denominator, x squared minus 6x minus 7. We'll set up parentheses. We'll put our x's in. We need 2 numbers that multiply to give me multiply to give me negative 7, add to give me negative 6. So those numbers should be negative 7 and positive 1. Now, I see something else that can be factored. So we got to break it all the way down till it cannot be factored anymore. So this one right here, x squared minus 1, that can be factored. So I need to break things down all the way until they can't be factored anymore. So this factors into the 2 sets of parentheses. So x squared minus 1, that factors into x plus 1 and x minus 1. How do I know that? Because I can think of 2 numbers that multiply to give me negative 1 and add to give me 0. Everything else, I'm just going to recopy. So everything else, I am recopying this one, recopying this one. Could draw my line. And I'm going to recopy the denominator. So recopy and recopy. So what we did was factor. We factored 2x squared minus 2. We broke it all the way down. That factors into 2 times x plus 1 times x minus 1. We factored x squared minus 10x plus 21. That factors into x minus 7 and x minus 3. we factored x squared minus 6x minus 7. That factors into x minus 7 and x plus 1. From here, if we have the same thing on the top and the bottom, we can start to cancel just like we did yesterday. So the x plus 1 goes away, x plus 1 goes away, x minus 7 goes away, x minus 7 goes away, and I think that's it. So our final answer left on top, I got the number 2. We got an x minus 1. And we got an x minus 3. So that is our final answer. 2 times x minus 1 times x minus 3. Nothing was left in the denominator, so there was no need to put a denominator of 1. So that is my answer for the first problem. So factor, 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 and then factor some more. All right, let's try the next one. We're going to try another one. So we're going to multiply. Okay, I'm not literally going to multiply them out. You'll see that I'm just going to put them beside each other. So c squared minus 3c times c squared plus 4c minus 5. We're going to draw our line. So this is us just putting the numerators beside each other. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. C squared minus 25 and c squared minus 4c plus 3. So I factored. Well, I'm going to factor. For right now, we just did top times top and bottom times bottom. The more of these we do, you won't have to put this one step here. I'm just doing it so that you know when you multiply fractions, you do top times top and bottom times bottom. Now we're going to factor. So let's start with this one. C squared minus 3c. You need to pull out your greatest common factor, which is c. Everything else is going to go on the inside. If you take a c away from everything, you're left with c minus 3. So this is us factoring c squared minus 3c. Now we need to factor c squared plus 4c minus 5. So we'll set it up parentheses, put our c's in there. We need to think of two numbers that multiply to give me negative 5 and add to give me 4. So those numbers should be 5 and 1. Okay, negative 1. So 5 times negative 1 is negative 5, and if I add that together, it gives me positive 4. So this is just the numerator. That's just the top of my fraction. Now we need to move down to the bottom of our fraction. Now we need to factor c squared minus 25. Now we've gotten to the bottom. So this is going to be 2 sets of parentheses. It needs to multiply to give me negative 25, add to give me 0. Again, multiply to give me negative 25, add to give us 0. That's plus 5 and minus 5. And the last one that we need to factor, we now need to factor c squared minus 4c plus 3. So we'll set up our 2 sets of parentheses. We'll put our c's in it. We're thinking of two numbers that multiply to give me positive 3, add to give me negative 4. Negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3. If I add it together, it gives me negative 4. Now that everything is completely factored, now that we have factored and broken everything completely down, you can start crossing stuff out like we did yesterday. So c minus 3 goes away. What else? C plus 5 and c minus 1. So our final answer, left on top, I got a c that's left over. And left on the bottom, we got c minus 5. That is our final answer. We can't cancel these out because this is over subtraction, and you can only cancel things that are being multiplied. Let's do one more multiplication problem, and then we will get to some dividing. So this is very factor intensive. Keep your foldable out as you're working. We're factoring the top, factoring the bottom, and then seeing what cancels. All right, so let's try this one. So I'm going to skip that intermediate step where I'm just writing them beside each other, and I'm going to go ahead and factor. So m minus 3 squared, that means to do m minus 3 times m minus 3. So check for that portion. So I've only done this portion of my fraction. Now I'm going to go break this down. So see what I can break this down into. I'm going to pull out the greatest common factor. I see they both share an m. So I'm going to pull out the m. And then everything else goes on the inside. If I take an m away from everything, I'm left with m squared minus 9. So that's us doing this section right here. Now I'm going to move on to the bottom. So on the bottom, we need to factor m squared minus 6m plus 9. So I need to go ahead and break that down. So we'll go ahead and do our parentheses. Put my m, and then put the m. So I need two numbers that multiply to give me 9 and add to give me negative 6. Okay. So those two numbers multiply to give me 9 and add to give me 6. Now, this can be factored. So this can be factored into m minus 3 and m plus 3. So I can absolutely factor this, but I also see that this factor is going to be the same as this factor. But for the time being, to give us more practice factoring, I am going to go ahead and factor this. And I'm going to put a little note here that this factors also into m minus 3 times m plus 3. So this is what we did. I have an m squared minus 9 that's on top from this numerator. I also had this m squared minus 9. I already know that they are going to cancel. So I did want us to practice factoring. So I just went ahead and broke that down into factored form. But I do know that all of that is going to cancel. So this m squared minus 9 is going to cancel out with that m squared minus 9. So I can cross it out. Cross it out, cross it out, cross it out. It's going to all go away. I have an m minus 3 that goes away. And I have another m minus 3 that goes away. So it looks like the only thing that's left on top here is m. So m is left on top. And then left on the bottom is absolutely nothing. So there's no need to put the number 1 there. So our final answer is m. So all of that simplified to m. So that was it. All of that simplified to m. All right, so that's multiplying. When you multiply, top times top, bottom times bottom, and then factor, 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 factor. Now let's get into dividing. So that's going to be the second half of our lesson for today. We're going to divide. So let's start with a number example. Sometimes I feel like it's a little easier if we start with a number example. So this is the number example that I have here. We're going to do 3/7 divided by 4/9. When you divide, you do keep, change, flip. So I'm going to keep the first fraction, change my division to multiplication, and then flip this. So I did keep, change, flip. Keep the first fraction, change division to multiplication, and then take the reciprocal, aka flip it, the second one. Now it's a multiplication problem that we can multiply. 3 times 9 is 27. 7 times 4 is 28. If you could reduce it, you would, but I cannot reduce this, so that is my final answer. So we're going to take this same concept and we're going to do it with our variables. So we're going to keep, change, flip. So I'm going to write that up here. Keep, change, flip. So keep, change, flip. So here we go. Keep the first one. Just recopy it. Change division to multiplication. Take the reciprocal of the second. Now this turns into a multiplication problem. So both of these are on top and both of these are on the bottom. If you have the same thing on the top and bottom, they cancel. So I have an n minus 2 here and I got an n minus 2 here. So my final answer is n plus 5 over 2n. That's my final answer. You cannot cancel these out. This is over addition. This is being multiplied. You can only factor out things that are being multiplied. So this is my final answer, n plus 5 over 2n. So not too bad. So keep, change, flip, and then it turns to a multiplication problem. Number 5, x squared minus 4x plus 3 divided by 2x. And then that is divided by x minus 1 over 2. So I'm going to keep the first one. Not going to change anything about it. Keep my first fraction. Change division to multiplication. Take the reciprocal of the second. Okay, so I keep, change, flip. Now I need to factor whatever can be factored. This can be factored. So we'll set up our parentheses. It's got to multiply to give me positive 3, add to give me negative 4. And this 2 just comes down. And these two just go beside each other because there's nothing that can be factored. So they go beside each other in the denominator. All right, now we can start crossing stuff out. If you have the same thing in the top and bottom, it cancels. So I see a x minus 1 here. I can cross that out with x minus 1. I see a 2 on top and a 2 right here. So I can cross out just the 2. And I think that's it. So left on top, I have an x minus 3. And left on the bottom, we have an x. So that is our final answer. All right, we're going to do one more division problem that we have 3 multiplying and 3 dividing. So let's get to our last dividing problem. We're going to keep, change, flip. So this is our last problem. Keep, change, flip. Keep, change, flip. So I'm going to keep the first one. 2m minus 1. M squared minus 3m minus 10. Change the multiplication and flip. So we keep, change, flip. Keep the first fraction, change division to multiplication, flip the second one. Keep, change, flip. Now we're going to factor, 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 factor. 2m minus 1 cannot be factored, so we're going to leave it as 2m minus 1. 4m plus 8 can be factored. Pull out your greatest common factor, which is the number 4. And then if you take a 4 away from everything, you're left with m plus 2. You can always check yourself because 4 times m is 4m and 4 times 2 is 8. We're going to do the same thing in the bottom. We're going to factor m squared minus 3m minus 10. 2 numbers that multiply to give me negative 10 and add to give me negative 3. So those numbers should be negative 5 and positive 2. And last but not least, we're going to factor 4m squared minus 1. We're going to factor that. That factors into the 2 sets of parentheses. 4 and 1 are perfect square numbers. So this is going to be 2m, 2m. And this is going to be 1 and 1. And 1's going to be plus and 1's going to be minus. So I went through and I factored each section. 2m minus 1 cannot be factored, but the other 3 sections could be factored, so we factored them. Now the easy part, we just start crossing stuff out that's the same in the top and the bottom. So I see a 2m minus 1 here and a 2m minus 1 there. Cancel, cancel. I see an m plus 2 and an m plus 2. Cancel, cancel, and I believe that's it. So our final answer left in the numerator is just the number 4. And left in the denominator is m minus 5 and 2m plus 1. Ta-da! So that is our final answer. So in conclusion, when you're multiplying, you do top times top and bottom times bottom. When you're dividing, you do keep, change, flip.